the first thing the workers noticed was not the leather. It was the line of gleaming pickup trucks stretching for nearly a mile under the bright afternoon sun, each one waiting patiently outside a weathered red barn that everyone in the county had laughed at for nearly a decade. The same barn where a local tannery had dumped mountains of worthless leather scraps every single week for 9 long years. The same black boy they had mocked for living beside what they called a mountain of trash was now shaking hands with wealthy contractors, master craftsmen, and business owners willing to pay hundreds of dollars for handmade tool belts carrying a name that had become a symbol of quality across the country. Some of the very people who once covered their noses whenever they drove past his property now stood silently in line, hoping for the chance to become one of his customers. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change lives, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share this story with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue sharing inspiring journeys together. Callum Mercer had been only 11 years old when the first truck backed into the empty space behind his grandfather's old barn. The barn stood on a forgotten piece of farmland outside a small American town where abandoned equipment rusted beneath the afternoon sun and wild grass swallowed fences that nobody could afford to repair. His parents had passed away within months of one another after long illnesses, leaving him in the care of his aging grandmother, Mabel Mercer, whose hands shook with arthritis but whose heart remained stronger than anyone Callum had ever known. Their savings disappeared paying medical bills, and every day became another careful calculation about groceries, electricity, and keeping the roof from collapsing. The local tannery had struggled to dispose of thousands of pounds of leather offcuts that could not be used in their large manufacturing contracts. Disposal fees were expensive. One afternoon a manager approached Mabel with what sounded like a favor. They offered a tiny monthly payment if they could dump unusable leather scraps behind the barn instead of hauling them to distant landfills. The amount barely covered a week's groceries, yet refusing was impossible. Hunger had a way of making unpleasant choices feel like blessings. Soon enormous piles of leather covered the field behind the barn. Thick brown pieces, narrow black strips, soft tan fragments, stiff belts of unfinished hide, oddly shaped corners left behind after factory cutting. The air carried the unmistakable smell of treated leather every afternoon as more truckloads arrived. Children riding bicycles pointed and laughed whenever they passed. Adults whispered that the Mercers had become the county dump. Some called the property Leather Hill. Others joked that no decent person would ever buy land beside so much waste. Every insult reached Callum's ears even when people believed he was too young to understand. He never answered. Instead, he watched. His grandmother had once been married to a saddle maker before Callum was born. Hidden inside dusty wooden cabinets were old stitching awls, edge bevelers, burnishing tools, punches, and hand-sewing needles that had not been touched in decades. During long sunny afternoons after finishing chores, Callum cleaned every tool until it shined again. He picked through the leather piles one piece at a time. At first he made terrible mistakes. Crooked cuts. Uneven stitches. Bent needles. Cracked edges. Every failure became another lesson. His grandmother never laughed. She simply smiled and reminded him that every masterpiece had once been an ugly beginning. Years passed beneath bright skies filled with changing seasons. Every afternoon brought more leather. Every afternoon brought more practice. Callum discovered that the factory discarded beautiful full-grain sections simply because automated cutting machines needed perfect dimensions. Small imperfections that meant nothing to handmade craftsmanship turned valuable material into industrial waste. He realized something the tannery never had. Machines saw flaws. Human hands saw possibilities. By 16, he was repairing neighbors' belts, horse tack, tool pouches, and work gloves. He charged little because he needed experience more than money. Local carpenters quietly admitted his repairs lasted longer than many new products purchased from hardware stores. Still, most people viewed him as the poor boy surrounded by garbage. One afternoon a traveling carpenter named Everett Sloan stopped after noticing several finished leather items hanging outside the barn. Everett had spent 40 years building homes throughout several states. His own expensive imported tool belt had split apart after only 18 months of heavy use. He examined one of Callum's homemade belts. He turned it over repeatedly beneath the sunlight. He studied every stitch. He looked directly into the teenager's eyes with genuine surprise. Without speaking much, Everett bought the belt for $80. 3 months later he returned. The belt looked almost new despite obvious hard daily use. This time he ordered 6 more. Word traveled slowly at first. Construction workers began arriving. Electricians came next. Then roofers. Plumbers. Cabinet makers. Linemen. Mechanics. Every satisfied customer returned with someone else. Callum refused shortcuts. Every belt was cut by hand. Every edge was burnished until smooth enough to glide across rough work clothing without fraying fabric. Every stress point received extra stitching that could not be seen from outside but dramatically increased durability. He tested every design himself by filling pockets with heavy steel tools before hanging them from wooden beams inside the barn. Whenever one failed, he smiled. Failure meant improvement before customers experienced disappointment. Success built quietly. Then disaster arrived. The tannery that had supplied the scraps announced new computerized cutting equipment designed to reduce waste dramatically. The factory celebrated lower costs. Everyone else applauded. Callum felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Within weeks the mountains of discarded leather stopped growing. His entire business depended on those scraps. Banks refused loans because he owned almost nothing. Suppliers demanded prices he could not afford. Competitors assumed the young craftsman would disappear within months. Even loyal customers worried. Yet something unexpected happened. Workers from inside the tannery began secretly visiting the barn during lunch breaks. They had watched Callum transform discarded material into respected craftsmanship for years. Many remembered the lonely child sorting through piles beneath scorching afternoon heat while others mocked him. They respected him. One employee quietly admitted the factory still discarded premium leather after occasional production mistakes, though company policy required destroying it. Another worker suggested purchasing imperfect hides directly before disposal. Eventually several retired supervisors encouraged management to reconsider. The company realized something remarkable. Their former trash had become a celebrated local business. Instead of destroying imperfect hides, they offered Callum a contract to purchase them at affordable prices. The arrangement benefited everyone. Waste decreased. Jobs remained secure. Callum gained reliable materials. The partnership became a model studied by neighboring manufacturers hoping to reduce industrial waste. As production expanded, Callum refused to leave the old barn. Friends insisted he build a modern factory elsewhere. He politely declined. He repaired the weathered roof. He reinforced the walls. He restored faded paint. He preserved every scar in the wooden beams because each one reminded him where impossible dreams had quietly begun. His grandmother watched every improvement from her rocking chair on the porch during warm afternoons, tears often filling her eyes as delivery trucks replaced the garbage haulers that once visited the property. Then another challenge emerged. A national company copied his belt designs and flooded stores with cheaper imitations carrying similar branding. Sales dropped sharply. Online customers became confused. Many believed Callum had sacrificed quality. Months of careful reputation building seemed ready to collapse. Instead of responding with anger, lawsuits, or bitter public attacks, Callum invited dozens of longtime customers to visit the barn during an open workshop. They watched every belt being stitched by hand. They handled the leather. They compared genuine craftsmanship with factory copies. They filmed the process and shared it freely across social media. Professional tradespeople spoke honestly about years of dependable use. No expensive advertising campaign could compete with authentic trust. Orders returned stronger than ever. The imitation company quietly abandoned the copied designs. Callum had not defeated them through revenge. He defeated them through integrity. Years later, the old barn had transformed into something extraordinary. Apprentices learned leatherworking beneath the same rafters where Callum had once struggled alone. Veterans rebuilding civilian careers discovered meaningful employment. Young people aging out of foster care found mentors willing to teach valuable lifelong skills instead of temporary jobs. Every employee understood the company's first rule. Nothing useful should ever be wasted. Not leather. Not opportunity. Not people. Every Friday afternoon, Callum personally walked through storage rooms where carefully sorted leather filled organized shelves instead of chaotic mountains. Whenever visitors admired the spotless workshop, he always led them behind the barn. There, beneath a simple wooden shelter, remained one untouched pile of old leather scraps from the earliest days. He refused to remove it. Some believed it looked out of place. To Callum, it looked like gratitude. It reminded every visitor where pride had grown from humiliation. One bright autumn afternoon, the Tannery celebrated its 100th anniversary. Executives invited Callum to deliver the keynote speech before employees, local leaders, students, and reporters gathered outside under clear blue skies. Many expected him to criticize the company for years of dumping waste beside his family's home. Instead, he thanked them. He explained that while the dumping had come from convenience rather than kindness, life had given him a choice. He could spend years resenting the burden or searching for value hidden inside it. The leather itself had never changed. Only the way someone chose to see it had changed. The crowd stood in silence before rising together in heartfelt applause. Among those clapping hardest were retired workers who remembered the skinny boy carrying armfuls of scraps into the old barn every afternoon while others laughed. His grandmother had passed away peacefully several years earlier, but one sentence she repeated throughout his childhood remained carved into a wooden plaque hanging above every workshop entrance. Hands guided by hope never waste what love can restore. That simple sentence became the soul of the company. One afternoon, nearly 20 years after the first load of discarded leather arrived, a nervous 12-year-old foster child named Rowan visited the barn with a social worker. The boy barely spoke. He stared at the floor, convinced nobody expected anything from him. Callum recognized the same quiet sadness he had once carried. Instead of offering sympathy, he placed several leather scraps, an old stitching needle, and a simple pattern on the workbench. Then he stepped away. By sunset, Rowan had completed a rough but promising key holder. It was imperfect. So had been Callum's first creation. The cycle of hope quietly began again. Before this story ends, I would love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing what you believe is the greatest lesson from Callum's journey. Can discarded opportunities become life's greatest blessings, or has someone else's kindness given you a second chance you will never forget? As the afternoon sunlight stretched across the old barn and reflected from rows of beautifully crafted tool belts ready for shipment around the country, visitors no longer saw a place once buried beneath unwanted scraps. They saw a living reminder that value is not determined by first impressions, that dignity can rise from seasons of humiliation, and that forgiveness often builds stronger foundations than bitterness ever could. The trucks still arrived every day, but now they carried dreams instead of waste, and every handcrafted belt leaving the barn carried an invisible stitch sewn from perseverance, gratitude, and hope. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember that the world may call something worthless, but the right heart, willing hands, and unwavering hope can transform what others throw away into a legacy that inspires generations.